Hey there, welcome back to The Core. I am your host, stylist and life coach Ren, and I'm here with my friend and beautiful co-host, licensed marriage and family therapist Kahara.
Hey, y'all.
Today we have an important topic to discuss: grief. Grief is a universal experience that we all encounter at some point in our lives. It can arise from various forms of loss, such as death of a loved one, the end of a relationship, a major life change, or even the loss of a job. In this episode, we will dive into the complex and multifaceted nature of grief and explore how it can impact us emotionally, mentally, and physically. We will also discuss coping strategies, support systems, and the importance of self-care during times of grief.
This is actually a hard one for me. I have to be honest. I came in here today. I had no idea that we were going to be talking about this. Only because I lost my dad a year and a half ago. And he actually passed away from cancer that we found out 3 weeks before he died, that he had it. So it's interesting during the process of my grief process beforehand, I'd had a lot of clients that were going through their own grief processes. And it was like God was instructing me what to tell them in preparation for my process.
Yes,
you know?
he will
So
do that.
I think this is an important conversation to have. I think it's really helpful because we're all experiencing it, even if it's not, like you said, the loss of a person that you love and care about. It's also the loss of a job, the pandemic, the loss of our social connections,
Yep.
Online dating and the loss of partners and all of that kind of thing too. So I'm happy that we're having this conversation.
Yeah. Do you have any tools that have been helping you?
Yeah, I first want to say, grief is so unpredictable. It's really complicated, and not everybody experiences it the same. So what is going to work for one person is not necessarily going to work for another
Exactly.
person. Even in my family, my sister and my mom are not dealing with the grief in the same way. We had a different relationship with my dad. We were having a very different grief process. I used to be a very less emotional person, and now I'm the person that cries in public, so I never thought that I was going to have this kind of reaction experience. It quite honestly, it changed me. I think I'm a different person as a result of it. But what I noticed helped me to cope as far as losing a parent was I did a lot of adjusting my expectations for how I was supposed to show up. So I think that sometimes, especially in therapy, people have an idea of what self-care is supposed to look like. Like, you should go work out and you should eat right and you should, do all the things. But what I noticed was I couldn't do any of that stuff. I was just trying to figure out how to survive. So I had to give myself permission to not
do anything.
look pretty while I was grieving,
Yeah.
And I thought that that was really helpful. But also, you get the spidey sense about the kind of people who can support you in that space. And I knew who was not helpful. I knew who I could not talk to about my process. I actually weeded out a lot of people in my social community because they couldn't support me where I was at the time. And I really leaned on the people who understood and who knew what it was like. So I had cousins who I hadn't expected that were going to come out of the woodwork because they had lost a parent. Yeah, oh my gosh, they were so helpful. And I honestly think that for me, the number one thing was having a community that got it,
Yeah.
because without that, I would have.
And they have counselors for grief alone.
Yeah, they do.
I've had family members lose their children.
Yeah.
And that was devastating. And you have to get in a support group.
Absolutely.
Have to get in a support group. Yeah.
I still see a therapist myself, just because I remember there was a time that I was at dinner with one of my girlfriends, and I was flooding her with all of my shit, and I was like, I can't have another dinner with her like this again. And so the therapist,
Why?
just because I didn't want to overwhelm her with my grief and take away from her ability to be reciprocal, and have an experience with me as a support to her.
Okay.
And so what I noticed was, by having a therapist, I was able to get out all of my feelings and all of what was coming up for me, because the hardest part about grief for me was not just losing a parent. It was what it meant, the implications and the impact on our family, right? Everything changed. Holidays changed. how we communicated with one another changed for better and for worse, you know? And so, having someone, a therapist to talk to about all of that stuff in ways that I don't want to talk to my sister and my mom because I know they're having their own process, invaluable also.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's like so permanent. It feels permanent.
Yeah.
It's not permanent, but
Yeah.
it feels permanent.
Sure.
Yeah, because
yeah.
we want to still have them here
Yeah.
on this side of heaven.
Right.
Although we will see them again.
Yeah.
It's not what you want to hear at the time.
No, it's not.
It's not.
But there was, I remember I had an acupuncturist and she also had lost her mom. I noticed that people who lost parents, I felt more comfortable talking to them about what was going on for me because they got it, you know? And I remember she was telling me at the time, she said, she's Native American, and she said in her value systems, they believe that the relationship is no longer from here to here, direct contact, but from here to here. And that actually was really helpful for me, knowing that there are like cues and indications that my dad is still here and wanting to like. Sometimes he'll play jokes on us and, you know, different things like that. Like we had an Easter egg hunt over Easter, and before he passed, hid gum. My mom loves gum. He hid it in the house. We found it during the Easter egg hunt.
Wow.
You know? Yeah. So it was our way of feeling like he was still there and connected with us. Yeah.
That
it
is
was
awesome.
And just finding different ways for us to stay connected. He loved music, and so different songs come on, and I feel him in the music, you know. Things
That's
like
amazing.
that have been really helpful.
Yeah, that's amazing. I lost one of I'm really, really close with my grandmothers. I lived with one of them, my maternal grandmother, but my paternal grandmother passed away suddenly. And she was super healthy, like the pillar of strength and the pillar of like wisdom and grace and beauty. And just, she was awesome, you know. And she used to tell me I reminded her so much of herself. She was a young widow, but she was celibate and just super anointed, and just got a phone call. I went to go see her the day before. Her legs had started to get weak, like where she couldn't use her own strength. No cancer, no diabetes, no high blood pressure, nothing.
Wow.
And when the doctor checked her out, he just said that her sodium count was low.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
And when I went to go see her, I felt like there was a spirit of death. I could feel the spirit. And so I just sat there with her. She was actually in a convalescent home, just a temporary situation until they got her physical therapy, because my aunt, who's tiny, she couldn't keep lifting her up.
Yeah.
And I called my aunt and my dad when I got out of there. I was like, there's a spirit of death in there. She has to get out. We got to get her out. We got to get her out. And the next day, she passed away.
Oh, my gosh.
She passed away.
I'm so sorry.
And it's so, when it's so abrupt like that.
Right.
Like 3 weeks for your dad. Like you would never think that.
And thank God I had the 3 weeks.
Thank God you had the 3 weeks.
I can't imagine it being abrupt.
Yeah, it was abrupt, you know. But when I saw her, you know, because they let me go down to see her at the hospital. And she just was resting. She looked like she was just sleeping, you know. And the way that I was able to deal with it, it hurt me to my core, you know. But the way that I was able to deal with it, the Lord allowed me to go into the spirit realm, and I could actually see her in a choir in heaven. And she had on all white, and she was a singer.
Yeah.
And she could sing opera. She was an opera singer. Wow. She was beautiful. And I was able to see her in this heavenly choir with all white on. And it broke me down. Like I hit the ground in a fetal position, and it gave me so much peace because she was so happy.
Wow.
She was so beautiful and so happy and young, and you know, and it really, really gave me peace. And I was so grateful, and I'm still grateful to God for allowing me to have that image because it was able to seal it in my spirit, seal it in my soul.
Yeah.
Like, I know that I'm going to see you again.
Right.
And you're happy.
Right.
And you're happy.
What do you think allowed you to be able, do you think that that was a thing that helped you to cope with her loss?
Absolutely.
Got it.
That image, that moment that God allowed me to go into the spirit that deeply, sealed it for me.
Gave you peace.
I haven't grieved her since.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
I haven't grieved her since. I love her.
Yes.
I wish I could still, because her birthday was the beginning of January. Mine's is kind of middle towards the end. And then my maternal grandmother's at the end of January. So I would get them by myself and take them to dinner, pick them up, treat them like royalty. So I miss those moments, I do miss her, but I'm not grieving her anymore.
Yeah.
I know that she was a believer. She loved God. She prayed, Bible laid out on the floor, and so for me to be able to see that she was actually happy, made me happy.
Yeah,
Made me happy.
And it's interesting because I think as far as grief is concerned, what I noticed is that there's no time frame for how long it lasts. So yours, you were able to have that moment where you could connect to her and see her where she's at, and that really was helpful for you. A lot of people, they think that it's supposed to be over after a year and a half for me, right? Or after 5 years, and that's not how grief works.
Yeah, and that get over it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that even when we're talking about giving ourselves grace, we have to permit ourselves to let it take as long as it takes, because grief doesn't ever go away. It just transforms. It just changes, because like you said, we miss the person that was here with us, and even when we know that they are in a better place and they're not suffering and all of those kinds of things, we miss what they meant to us when they were here, So I think that it's a tricky thing in terms of what it looks like to quote unquote get over it, because I don't think that's a thing,
For me, with my grandmother, I cared more about her being healthy, and her being in peace than my having her here in an unhealthy state. You know? And so that made me remove some of the pain of losing her here. Even my maternal grandmother, she's had a stroke. So I don't have the same, we're not able to do the things that we used to do together. And it's harder for me to see her like that,
right,
than to see my paternal grandmother in heaven. Because my maternal grandmother, although she's still here, she's she's not herself. She's not herself. But she's 97, and people are like, but she's 97.
Amazing.
Yeah, but she would have wanted to still be walking around, doing her thing, so it's hard for me to see her. There's moments where I go see her that I leave and have to get myself together, and she's still here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I love her.
I can totally resonate with that. When my dad, at the worst points, I just wanted his suffering to be over, and it makes me emotional even thinking about it. But I just really wanted his suffering to be over, and there was a sense of relief when he finally passed. And I felt guilty actually about feeling that. I still feel guilty saying it out loud, but there was something about
because
knowing
you
that
love
he didn't
him,
have
and you
to
love
deal
him
with that.
without conditions.
Right.
And when you see somebody suffering, you do not want that for them.
Right.
Yeah, I had an uncle who had cancer, and he was just screaming, and this strong man that you would never think was screaming that he wanted to go home. He didn't want to, he wanted to go home, is what he was saying. So it is very difficult.
Absolutely difficult.
And even, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, even, I was just going to switch to like relationships.
Me too.
You too?
Go ahead.
Good. Yeah. Great minds think alike.
I know.
But yeah, grieving, when it's so, you were talking about ghosting, and when it's so abrupt,
right.
It is very hard for people to cope. And it has cycles.
Right.
The grief has cycles. You can think that you're better, and then you have a bad day, and
Right.
the
Yeah.
cognitive dissonance and all that stuff.
Yeah. Two things that I have learned about my grief since is that the brain actually does develop like neurons and things affiliated with the person that we lose. And so the reason why it's so hard is because our brain is trying to process what it means for them not to be in our lives anymore. I thought that was really profound because knowing that there is a biological process affiliated with that
Right.
was really helpful for me. I felt then like I wasn't going crazy. It wasn't just
Right.
me, but the other thing, and I would say this to people, and we could talk about, the grief and all of that kind of thing in terms of the other realms of grief. But the conversations that I would have with people is there is this idea that you're supposed to go through the 5 stages. So the 5 stages are shock and denial, bargaining, sadness and depression, anger, and then acceptance, right? The idea is that you come to acceptance and it's over. That is not how it works. So I tell everybody that grief is circular. You vacillate in and out of those grief stages at any given point.
Right.
And you could have all of those things in one day, So I think it's important for people to know that, like we're saying, it's not just an endpoint where you come to acceptance and you go on about your life. Because even when we're talking about these different facets of grief, like job loss and losing a partner and, things like that, the constant conversation is, why am I not over it? I should be accepting it now. And so now I should be over it. And like we're saying, that's just not how it works.
Well, sometimes it depends, right, on the degree of the relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And how you lost them. One of the things that I was telling you off camera was during the with social media and online dating, what I've noticed is that people are going through what I've termed as micro grief, right? These kinds of small, rapid fire grief processes that happen because they get to know a person, they connect with them, what feels deeply, and then they ghost, and then they lose them, or they're on to the next person. And our psyches and our spirits are not designed to tolerate that much grief so quickly. And so people who are online dating or in these spaces, they are dealing with constant rejection, and we're being bombarded with that, and they wonder why they're feeling depressed or anxious or any of those, traumatized.
It's trauma.
Absolutely.
That's what I was waiting to say.
Absolutely.
It is trauma. It's the narcissist cycle. They go from the idealization, the love bombing, to devaluing you, to discarding you. And it could happen in 2 days.
Right.
It can happen on one date.
Right.
They can go through it all in one day. And people, and I'm telling you, I would tell my clients this. I'm like, you are allowing too much access to yourself. Too much access to yourself. And then you're depressed.
Right.
And you're like, there's no man in LA. There's no this, no girl.
Right.
Like you're allowing too many people to have too much access to your soul.
Exactly.
And then I have clients that have been living with grief, but they're still with the person. Like you're living with this constant cycle of devaluing, discard, love bombing, devaluing, discard, love bombing, devalue, and for 30 years. And they're telling me, I don't know how you got away from him. I don't know, like I would have never done that.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, but guess he didn't make me do it. You made me do it.
Yes.
Looking at you made me do it.
Right. Right.
I would never want to be you.
Yes.
And then you end up with sickness and disease.
Absolutely.
Dis-ease. Sickness and disease.
Right.
Rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, cancers, all of these issues. Inflammation.
Right.
Dementia.
Right.
All of those are blows to your soul.
Absolutely.
All of those come from blows to your soul. Your body, like you said, cannot handle it.
Right. We are not equipped to sustain such a high level of grief so quickly and so much, so frequently, you know. And so it's difficult because people have a hard time recovering. And like we're saying, they're traumatized. So they don't want to get back on the platforms, which is probably a smart idea for a while. Or they're recognizing that they're having a harder time trusting in the process of love or, things like that. Reasonably so. but the thing that I tell folks, even in those kind of processes, the process around healing and support are the same, right? You want to find the people who are going to be as supportive as possible. You want to make sure that you're doing whatever you need to be able to experience what you're feeling and give yourself permission to have that process. And you want to give yourself permission to have that process.
Yes.
You know, self-care, I think, is something that's important, but that depending on where you're at in the grief cycle and the grief process and what you've lost, we have varying degrees of capacity for self-care.
Yeah.
You know?
And there's so many different like formulas, and it is all, again, custom based on the person.
Right.
Because I was in my house in grief there, and I would self-care myself crazy.
Yeah.
Every second I got, I was trying to get a massage. I was trying to get a facial. I was getting a lymphatic massage. I was getting nails, feet, this, because I wanted someone to touch my soul.
Yes.
I wanted someone to actually touch my soul. I thought that them touching me was touching my soul, and it was only temporary because when I came up from it, I still had the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now that I'm away from that situation and disconnected myself completely from that trauma, I haven't even had a need for self-care like that. It just switched.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Wow.
And that's the way that it worked for me.
Yeah, of course.
But I needed to do that while I was in the house.
Yes.
I needed to do that because I was finding temporary pockets of relief from it, which I feel kept my mind. Kept my mind while I was going through that. I did not implode, you know.
I love what you're saying about the temporary pockets of relief because I can totally resonate with that. I think even during my process, for me, relief was being honestly, and I feel like there's this conversation with people as far as grief is concerned, not to distract. And I think that there is a such thing as healthy distraction. Sometimes we just need to not hear our thoughts and to not feel the depth of the grief. And if we can find things to occupy our time and our minds and our spirits in ways that don't harm us,
right?
I think that that's valuable, you know? So like
a mental break.
Right.
And you can feel when you're breaking mentally.
Totally.
And it is very important for it to be your responsibility to take that moment no matter what anybody has to say about it.
Exactly.
A mental day, whatever it is. Go to the beach, whatever you need to do.
Yeah. I actually, during the course of my dad being sick and then his passing, I worked the whole time. And that actually was a healthy distraction for me. I felt like life felt normal when I was doing the things that I was normally doing, you know? So for me, going to work every day and walking my dog every day and doing all the things that I would typically do, that actually was really helpful for me because I felt like life was going on even though life was going on, you know? And it allowed me to be able to figure out how to keep going.
Yeah, you stayed strong in the process, and you pressed through.
I don't know if I stayed strong.
Well, you did. A lot of people can't. You did.
I don't know. I wouldn't call it that. I definitely, I honestly still today, I feel like I'm still surviving at times.
Yeah,
know?
but you're still strong, though.
Yeah.
You're still strong.
Maybe.
You still are allowed to feel something and still be strong.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that was where my strength came from, was giving myself permission to cry, even when I didn't want to. You know, even when I'm welling up here on camera.
Yeah.
Or when you and I were at dinner and I was crying at dinner. I would never do that before. For me, that feels like strength. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Allowing yourself. I remember when I first left, my sister, Mia, who is hilarious. I was like, I need to go run. That was my thing. I need to go run.
Yeah.
And so she was like, I'm going to go with you to the beach. She went, I was like, we're just going to run from this volleyball court to this volleyball net, you know, back and forth, just like 10 times.
Yeah.
So she's running with me, you know, we're both running or whatever.
Yeah.
And then she's just like, I'm tired. And so I said, okay, just give me like 10 more.
Yeah.
I had something that I needed to get out, you know, and I allowed myself to just run until I no longer felt that. But you have to be connected with yourself and know what you need. Right. Everything is custom.
Right.
Everything is custom. And at that moment, that's what I needed to do.
Yeah.
I needed to run back and forth to this volleyball net to net on the sand
Right.
until it was gone.
Yeah.
Then it was gone.
Until
I
you
could go
couldn't
about
feel
my
that
day.
kind of hurt, right? It was
Exactly.
just the physical pain that took over.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Absolutely.
sense.
So it was a distraction.
Right.
A healthy distraction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think if we could like give a few things that would help people grieving? What do you think you would recommend? Whether it's job loss or like the romantic loss or loss of death of a loved one. What do you think are some things that you would recommend for people?
Death of a loved one is different to me than loss of a relationship
Sure.
or a job. In those two instances, I would make it my idea. That's what I do. I make, whether it was something I could control or not, there's something about it that didn't fit with me. So I would say, thank God, because it was something that I couldn't see
Sure.
in this that was not healthy for me.
Sure.
Because anything that was healthy for me would remain. God would allow it to remain. Or even if it's healthy and God decided that the season had come to an end.
Yeah.
So my confidence and my faith would be in the fact that the Lord was moving me for a divine reason and His purpose. I'm in alignment with His purpose, and that's what His will was. Is that it came to an end. So
In
what's
therapy, we call that a reframe. That's
Okay.
good. Yeah,
Okay.
reframing away from the
reframe.
negative to the positive. Yes. Yeah.
That's what I always do. I've had to do that my whole entire life. You know, no matter what, because I went through a lot of grief as a young child.
Sure.
And so I had to come up with things that made me feel better about the moment.
Right.
And I really believe that it created a better, smoother transition for me into the next moment. Although it hurt, but I was able to press through because I had a bright side.
Yeah.
There was a light at the end of this tunnel. I didn't lose hope. Nothing has ever made me lose hope.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing has ever made me lose hope.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. I reframe.
Yes. Yes, reframe. I love that.
What do you do?
As far as all the losses are concerned, the things that I typically recommend for every one of those people, and some of the things that I did for myself, was give myself time. I think that a lot of times people hop out of one thing and into another, and they don't get a chance to really understand what just happened,
Right.
So whether it's a job loss or a relationship loss, or the loss of a person, like the death of a person, to not take the time to figure out what did that mean to me and what happened here. I just think that it's never good to move too fast,
Right.
So definitely giving time is important. Definitely finding a community of helpful people is important. For a lot of people, religion was a thing. For me, actually, what I noticed was I was mad at God for a little bit. I have to be honest. I felt like, how could He let this happen? And so it took a while for me to really get acquainted with what I thought about that. And now I have a spiritual connection that has I reinvigorated my spiritual connection. But for a while, spirituality and God wasn't what I needed at that time, what I thought that I needed in the way that I needed. I could only listen to a certain pastor. I could only listen to certain sermons about things that I felt were helpful, So things like that, I think giving people their process even is really important. Like we're saying, it's unique to everybody,
Yeah.
What do you think about how you would recommend someone to support someone going through grief? What's your perspective?
I feel like it's very important to hear what they need. Don't come in full throttle.
Yes.
Like my sister on my way here, she just asked me, she said, I don't know what to say when someone tells me that they lost their mother. This just happened on my way here.
Wow.
And I told her, I said, all you do is just tell her that you're sorry for her loss and ask her if she needs anything.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
That's it. Because
Right.
you really don't know what to say.
Right.
And she'll tell you what she needs.
Right.
And let her know that you're always available. you know,
I love
for
that.
her. So that's what I think. I don't think that you come with all of your ideas,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people do end up mad at God,
Yeah.
you know, over things. God didn't do it though.
Sure.
You know what I'm saying? But
Sure.
people have it's not the time to come do that.
Right, of
Beat you
course.
over the head with anything.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So,
Like you said, they're in a better place wasn't helpful, you know.
yeah.
Because I was just suffering with the fact that he wasn't in this place.
Yeah.
You know.
And a lot of the things that we don't know about God, we don't take the time to get to know about him because his way and his majesty, his master, he's a master. The way that he's just everything is already ordained. Everything is already inscripted. You know what I'm saying? And when
Yeah.
we understand his ways, then we're not so upset
Sure.
at him, but
Sure.
you know, there is an adversary.
Yeah.
And then there is lifestyle. And the one thing that is promised to us is that we're all going to pass from here at some point.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think that it's better if, you know, it happens tragically or it's never a moment that
it's never better.
My grandmother, you know, she was elderly.
Yeah.
And it still wasn't time for me. My
Yes.
grandmother, who is my maternal grandmother, is 97.
Yes.
Still, you know, you're just never ready to be without your loved ones.
Yes.
You're
Right.
never ready to be without them.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
even when you know God's ways and
Yeah.
you know how awesome he is and you know that they're in another place.
Yeah.
It's still, don't come over here talking about that right now.
Exactly.
Give me a minute.
Exactly.
Give me a minute to feel this.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I like what you're saying about knowing what people need because I think the thing that I would say is don't not acknowledge the loss, right? Because
Right.
people feel so uncomfortable with talking about it that they'll pretend like nothing's happening and then they'll just go about talking about regular stuff, right? And I think that just to acknowledge it gives space for the person to be able to say what they need by seeing how they respond to it, you know? If they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, this happened and they want to get into detail, giving the space for the detail is important. Not trying to rush to make themselves feel better because they're uncomfortable with the loss conversation. you
Yeah,
know?
because it's not even about them.
Exactly.
It's not about them.
Exactly.
It's amazing how people make things like that about them.
Absolutely.
It's not even about you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Even if you want to,
Yeah.
because in my process of divorce,
Yeah.
none of my friends were around. None of my friends were around.
Yeah.
But they always know me to be the strong one.
Sure.
And honestly, I feel like God orchestrated it like that because I really didn't need a bunch of chit chatter. I didn't need a bunch of that.
Sure.
I needed to just be by myself. And I needed to
Sure.
understand that I bought into something
Yeah.
that now was dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now
right.
it died.
Right.
So yeah, there's thoughts that I thought there were things I thought we were going to do. There were visions that I had of us together because as you enter a relationship with someone, you have all of these ideas and all of these, you know, plans and all of
Right.
these prior Christmases and Father's Days and, you know, anniversaries and this and that and all of this stuff. Well, now it has come to an end.
Right.
The divorce, the divide, the division,
Yeah.
it's a death.
Yeah.
It's a death of a relationship. So I really didn't need I never liked him. Girl, I never, I knew, ooh, remember that time? I didn't need any of that.
Right.
So God silenced
Yeah.
my crew.
Yeah.
And my crew are people that I love, that I know love me.
Right.
But God decided at that time, they don't need to call you. They don't need to do anything. You listen to me. And it expedited my healing.
Interesting. Sure.
It changed it for me. And when I reframed it
Yeah.
and said, this was something that the Lord said he was done with.
Yeah.
He was done with it. And I don't want to be anywhere that he's not.
Yes. Yeah.
This relationship was dead.
Right.
And he said, I'm leaving. Are you coming with me?
Yeah.
I'm absolutely coming with you.
Yeah.
So now I feel better about it because I understand that it was his plan and it was his purpose. I don't have the religious view of divorce.
Right. Of course.
And even if I did, that covenant was broken by him. So I have all rights to do what I was doing in the
Sure.
divorce. But I didn't have that religious thing because having the Holy Spirit on the inside of me, I'm going to do what I feel led to do because this is spirit and truth for me.
Right, of course.
I'm the one that is, in this situation. So that's what I had to do. I had to reframe and say, you know what? This is God's will for me.
Yeah.
Pull up your big girls
Yeah.
and let's go.
Yeah, of course. Do you think in the aftermath of everything, now that your people are back around, is there anything that they say now that's helpful for you?
We don't even talk about it.
Got it. Got it.
We don't even talk about it.
Got it.
They'll just, is it over yet?
Okay.
I'm like, girl, I wish it would,
Yeah.
but we don't even talk about it. It's
Yeah.
when they saw that I was fine, now everybody has moved on. And they all say, well, we knew that you were going to, they say I'm a loner.
Yeah.
I like to be by myself. I do. I like to really hear from God and be by myself, but y'all could have still called me.
I know, and I think that
No, I'm just
here's
playing.
why I take offense sometimes to this label of like being strong. The reason why I get so frustrated by that is that when the connotation is that we don't need anything, and that's not true. And I think what I had to train myself in my grief was to tell people when I wasn't okay. Because my strong self in my regular life was a person that didn't need a lot of things from other people. And so I didn't necessarily need to tell people, hey, I'm struggling, I'm having a hard time. I had to learn how to have the language around that, So when people are thinking, oh, they're strong, they're going to be fine, they'll get over it, they'll deal with it. I think that that's a misconception. And it doesn't give space for a person who is strong and probably capable and independent and all those things to need stuff and to require support, So I think if there was anything that I could say to people in terms of how to support other folks in this space too, is don't rely on them being strong to get out of the hardship, because it's hard and it's awful, and it doesn't matter, like we're saying, if it was a loss of a job or a partner or a death. It's all hard, There, of course, is varying degrees of that, but we need to know that people need support, and we're capable of getting through it, yes, but it would be helpful if people were around with us to do that,
So when people reframe, is that healthy?
I think so.
Because I just reframed again.
Yeah.
When I was talking about my friends. Did you see that?
I did
was like,
see that.
God wanted me to, heal by myself.
Yeah.
And I basically let people off the hook.
Yeah.
Is that letting people off the hook?
I do think it is a little bit. I got
It makes me feel good, but it really makes me feel better.
Your people should have been there for you. Sorry, people out there.
But honestly, I don't know that it could have been any better.
Sure.
I really think that it would have been too much.
Yeah.
Because then you have to deal with people's opinions and their perspective, and I just really didn't want any of that.
And to be quite honest, I completely understand what you're saying, because there were times where I had to teach my husband how to support me because he was saying all the wrong stuff. And I was like, I don't need that right now, So yes, you're right. When we have people around us, we do have to kind of coach them to do what we need them to do. And the reframe, for some people, that's helpful, So it sounds like for you to be able to look at it from an alternative perspective and to see how God influenced that, it sounds like that worked for you, And so I think that it just goes back to what you're saying about we got to do what works for us.
Right.
And that's ultimately the most important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had a client
Yes.
email us a question for you. How can I find meaning and purpose in life after experiencing a significant loss? And what are some strategies for moving forward while still honoring the memory of my loved one?
I love that. What I would say that I have specifically done is I needed to find a way to connect to my dad's legacy, and so for him, like we're saying, music was a part of his legacy. He had a truck that he loved. It was a 1993 Toyota, and it was right now it's ragged. It's a mess.
Uh-huh.
He named it Kirby. And so for me to restore that, that's my process right now. I'm in the process of restoring his truck. I need to know that I'm doing things that connect to him. Doing the podcast is something that he wanted me to do, and that's what he asked me to do before he passed. So being able to connect to his legacy is something that's really useful and helpful. I think that for other people, finding first of all, not escalating, like we're saying, to the meaning of the thing necessarily, right? Because sometimes you're not going to know it for a while. But when you can connect to what the point of all of it was, and what we do now, I think that it allows us to be able to figure out, okay, now what's next? You know, so not feeling pressured to have some kind of meaning or lesson after it so quickly, I think it's important.
Do you think that it stunts some of the healing when you always have to know why?
I think that there are just some things, I think that's the human's way of control, right? There are just some things that we're not going to have an answer for.
Right.
And even in my reconnection back to my spirituality, I had to come to terms with the fact that I just wasn't going to have an answer for why my dad went the way that he did.
Exactly.
You know, and so I realized that it's our way of trying to prevent our trauma. If we can understand why it happened, we can prevent it from happening again in the future. But unfortunately, it's just no way for us to do that. We can't perfect that process.
Right. I was going to say you really can't, though.
Right.
You can never stop something from happening.
Right.
You know.
Right.
We
So
really don't have the control that we think we have. And when you have to know answers to everything all the time, it will stunt your growth and your healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the biggest part of all of this for me was learning that I don't have the control that I thought I did, you know, and coming to terms with that, what that means, and how I cope with that has been a learning process that I'm still in process of right now.
Yeah, but you're in counseling, you're in
Yeah.
therapy, and so
Right.
you're controlling what you can control.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And thank God I'm counseling other people. And so that's been a helpful part of my process too, and including in terms of the legacy as well. So executing my purpose in that way has also been something that's been really
love that.
vital. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Thank you for giving me the space to talk about this.
Of
I thought I was going to fall apart.
You did
I'm
good.
still intact, you know,
Yes.
and I appreciate you sharing your experience.
I'm sure
and
you're
your
helping a
process,
lot of
too.
people out there.
And you too. And I
Yeah.
think that it's just something that we can't not talk about. You
And
know?
I'm glad that we're doing this.
Me too.
And we'll do this show in memory of your dad.
Absolutely. Every show is in memory of
Every
my
show
dad.
is in memory of your
Right.
dad, but we'll put it on the screen.
Absolutely. Hey, Daddy.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you
Aw,
so
I love you.
much. I love you too. I
Bye,
appreciate you.
guys.
Bye.